Hello, Archie Dunlop here with Talking Astrology with Archie on Friday, August the 1st, 2025. So happy August. And in this video, I want to look at a few things. I want to look at the fact that today there is a square aspect between Venus and Saturn. It's also first quarter moon. That's something we need to look at. What else? It's the 81st anniversary of the Warsaw Uprising that started, I think, at 5 p.m. on August the 1st, 1944 in Warsaw. So, yeah, there are a couple of things to look at. Oh, I just noticed, by the way, that the price of copper has fallen sort of hugely. It's been happening, over the last day or two, and it may be connected with the fact that Venus is changing sign, because Venus, rules copper, and so Venus is sort of late Gemini, was in sort of late Gemini. It's now just moving into Cancer, and it's sort of making a square to Saturn, square to Neptune. So that might also be something we want to look at today. But first of all, I want to consider the astrology and the I Ching for today. Friday, August the 1st, 2025. And don't forget to like and subscribe if appropriate. So here is a chart set for today, Friday, August 1st, 2025, New York. And the moon is still in Scorpio. The moon is at 11 degrees Scorpio. And so moon is very much in the Via Combusta. And it's the Scorpio part of a Via Combusta, which tends to be more difficult from the Libra side. Things can happen. We shouldn't assume that everything is going to work to plan. And with the moon in Scorpio, it's quite an emotional placement for the moon, and so there might be strong feelings that can't always be brought out into the open. Maybe it's not helped by the fact that there's a square to the sun. So we've got the moon in Scorpio making a square to the sun in Leo. And it's a fixed square, obviously. So some things may be, held very tightly. And, we don't want to bring them out into the open. And at the same time, we could be quite stubborn. But it being a first quarter moon, this may be a first crisis of action. The new moon was, just over a week ago, and so a new lunar cycle. But what are we going to do with it? What happens now? And with this first quarter moon, we have perhaps to make a decision, and it might be difficult to make that decision because, some of us can be set in our ways and we'd like things to just continue as they have done in the past. But that might not necessarily be such a good idea. I mean, we want to make progress. And some of the stuckness, potentially, of that first quarter moon is also reflected by the fact that we've got Venus square Saturn. And so, Venus square Saturn, we think of Venus in Cancer, Venus in a very emotional sign in Cancer, and you'd think that Venus moving from Gemini into Cancer, things would be more fluid and we would be more responsive. But with the square to Saturn, not necessarily. And so it's possible, but in certain cases, relationships are a disappointment. People are not necessarily able to respond emotionally, or perhaps we can't respond emotionally. And so you could say that the sun and the moon and the Venus, these sort of feminine planets, are both making squares. Moon square Sun, Venus square Saturn, and also Venus is square Neptune. So Venus is square the Saturn-Neptune conjunction. And so with that square, something is being held back, but also there's some fear there. Saturn-Neptune is an aspect connected with being worried, and because we're worried, we don't necessarily want to take risks, and we certainly don't want to take risks by making sort of too much of an effort to show our feelings. Bad things can happen if we show our feelings. I'm not saying they will happen, but they could happen, and that certainly could be our perception. So that is a picture for New York at noon. If we set the chart for noon Sydney, Australia, the moon is still in Scorpio. Moon is applying to a square of the sun, so I wouldn't have said there's a huge amount of difference between the picture in Australasia and the Americas. And then there is the heliocentric view. So the Earth is still making a conjunction to Mercury. So many of us feel there are things we would like to say, but are we actually going to be able to say them? Remember, geocentrically, Mercury is retrograde, and it is close to the sun. Of course, heliocentrically, Mercury is close to the Earth. But I do think there is something we want to get out into the open. Whether we're going to achieve it or not is a different matter. And additionally, we have got Venus square Pluto. We had Venus square Pluto, I think yesterday. It was starting to form. Now this aspect is exact. So heliocentric Venus square Pluto, it's coming at the same time as a geocentric Venus square Saturn aspect. So that may also say something about relationships. Something is being hidden. When we were thinking about the geocentric Venus square Saturn, it doesn't mean to say that there are no emotions. In fact, emotions may be intensified, but they may not be revealed. There's a lot that is kept hidden, and you could say the same with Venus square Pluto. That may be hiding some of the things that we regard as being important, but we just can't quite find the right way to express them. And additionally, Chiron is making an opposition to Mars, or Mars is pretty close to that opposition of Chiron, and so Mars is about action. Chiron is about acting in a way that is very individual, and some of us might want to do that. We might want to do something that no one expects, and we really want to express our individuality. Though with Mars opposition Chiron, there might also be a sense that we can't do everything that we want. If we were to do everything that we wanted to do, then it might go wrong. And if we think about Chiron as some kind of wound, that may be the impulse. We feel that we have been wounded and we can't do things that we would like to do, but we really want to do them. And so that kind of gives a similar message of Mercury conjunct Earth. It's a lot to say, but can we say it? And so the overall feeling might be one of frustration. And Mars isn't just making an opposition to Chiron; it's starting to make a quincunx to Saturn. Okay, that quincunx is not necessarily going to be exact for a bit of time, but it just may be a day when it's just not easy to do everything we want to do. And if we want to keep it simple, we could say, well, Venus is square Saturn geocentrically, and it's a tough aspect. And you could say the same about Venus square Neptune. So let me now look at things from the viewpoint of the 12 signs. So these are my forecasts for the 12 signs for today, which is Friday, August the 1st, 2025. Aries. The day is somewhat dominated by a square aspect between Venus and Saturn. And this square aspect, could be relevant to you. After all, Saturn is moving through Aries. Venus is making a square to Saturn. And so Saturn may say quite a lot about you. And with Saturn in Aries, you may be taking yourself seriously. And your seriousness is intensified by the fact that the moon is in Scorpio. Now, you might regard yourself as being someone who is quite easygoing, and you can be quite sort of dynamic, and you can move from one thing to another, and normally you don't take things too seriously. Okay, you can get annoyed, but it's that sort of Aries anger that's very, very short-lived. But with Venus square Saturn, you do have the capacity to really close things down. Maybe you're not aware of this, and so do think about the kind of atmosphere you are developing, all around you, and what impact this might have, on other people. But certainly, people notice you. You're impossible not to notice, but you may make people feel quite self-conscious. And one reason that people might feel self-conscious is because they are aware of your annoyances and irritations. When Aries decides to have a display of irritation, anger, contempt, they can do it very well. They can do it very powerfully. And so you might find that some people are sort of tiptoeing around you, and it might well be, Aries, that this is the impression you are trying to give. That's great, but maybe not. And so Aries, do think carefully about your various relationships and how people are seeing you. And so if there have been recent issues, and with Venus square Saturn, they might sort of come out into the open. And additionally, things might be hidden. And if things are being hidden, why might they be hidden? Some people might just be afraid of telling you the truth, or just afraid of expressing themselves in your presence. So I don't want to exaggerate. This is just one day. It's just a Friday. But Aries, you do have to consider this as a possibility. Now, there is a fortunate way of looking at it. I think that at the moment your organizing abilities are going to be pretty good, and if there are things that you don't like, then you'll have no difficulty expressing this. And this especially applies to your domestic environment, and dealing with your home and family. If you feel that your home and family are not in the best place, and that things could be better, then don't just get annoyed. What can you do to make sense of it all? And at the moment, people are prepared to take you seriously, and they're prepared to sort of listen to what you've got to say. And so try to take it easy today, and most importantly, be sympathetic. Even if at some level you do have contempt for another person, at least give them a chance. And if you are in a situation where everyone is feeling self-conscious, and they don't quite know how to approach you, then that is obviously not ideal. And at the same time, Aries, do think about yourself. It's not all about other people. There is first quarter moon today. We had a new moon in Leo a week ago, and I think that new moon in Leo is pretty fortunate for you. But what does it mean? As far as I can see, that new moon in Leo is encouraging you to do something new and creative, and to make the most of yourself. It's not necessarily about other people. It's about what you want to do. And the moon square the sun is about a challenge. It's what you have to actually do to turn theory into practice, to really enjoy yourself. Not just enjoy yourself in a superficial way, but to enjoy yourself in a way that is powerful, that you're engaging in something that is all about you and may even be about your destiny. And with that moon square sun, perhaps a challenge is to engage with everything at all levels, including on the emotional level, and to sort of really get into the whole power of your personality. And it's not about other people, it's about what you can do. And it's you mustn't be afraid of your own power. And it may be in the end quite a solitary journey as you try to work out what is important. And that might be a good reason for keeping people at arm's length, not just because they might get in your way or might distract you, but also if people get too close to you at the moment, you just might be difficult to deal with. But that's something I've already suggested earlier on. Taurus, the big aspects are two squares, Venus square Saturn and Venus square Neptune. These two aspects may well have an impact on you, and this is because obviously Venus is your ruler, and you've just had Venus moving into Cancer, and I regard Venus moving into Cancer as being a good thing. Venus works relatively well in this sign, particularly in the first 10 degrees of Cancer. It's in its own decanate, and so in general you're probably feeling sort of more comfortable, and this may feel like a chance to be able to express yourself and to sort of communicate on your terms, at least in a sort of a longer term sense. But short term, talking about today, for example, this Venus square Saturn could be a problem. Also Venus square Neptune. There might be things that you want to do and you just can't do it. Something is holding you back. And the question is, what is it? Is it something external, something very real that has to be negotiated or accepted? Or is it something in your mind? There is a good chance that it is something in your mind. For some reason, you just don't want to do something. And, being a Taurus, you like to do things your way, and you can be, quite stubborn, and it can take a long time for you to change from one state to another, and you can come up with all sorts of reasons why you shouldn't be doing something. And maybe that's what's happening at the moment with this Venus square Saturn and Venus square Neptune. Something that you are afraid of, and this is especially the case if you feel that this is a time when you should be moving on to sort of new territory. You kind of know objectively that something has to change. Today also we have a first quarter moon, and first quarter moon can be a crisis of action. You've got ideas, you've got concepts, but what happens next, what happens now? And so you might be having to deal with that crisis, and you're coming up with reasons why it shouldn't happen. So my advice, Taurus, would be that if you feel that you don't want to do something, ask yourself why. And you might have some very good reasons why you should just be staying still, but ask yourself, to what extent are you making it up? You might be giving something or someone too much power. You might have assumed that a situation is so complicated that you just cannot possibly get through it. So why bother? But I think that the reality is that it's just not quite as bad as you think, and that if you make the effort, you can actually make that first move. And to begin with, it might not be easy. You may be of a view that you're wasting your time, but if you keep going, Venus will get past that square to Saturn, that square to Neptune, and there will be clarity. And of course, once Venus has passed that square to Saturn and Neptune, it then moves on and starts making a conjunction to Jupiter. Over the next couple of weeks, Venus will be getting closer and closer to Jupiter, and I regard that as being something for you to really look forward to. And at the same time, don't underestimate the impact of other people. That may be what this first quarter moon is about. This first quarter moon, again, it's in fixed signs. Moon is in Scorpio, square the sun in Leo, and so there is a challenge to get out. And your first impulse with the new moon, just over a week ago, that new moon in Leo, would be just to stick to what you've got and not necessarily to take huge risks. Maybe even just count your blessings, and don't be too much of an adventurer. But that moon square sun, the challenge, it could be coming from another person. Outside forces are encouraging you to do something differently, and if you don't respond to these external forces, there's just a possibility that you might not be making the most of your potential. Remember, this lunar cycle, you've got to act quickly. In a week's time it'll be the full moon, and then it will be the end of August. So if there's something that needs to be done, then make sure you get going on it. And I certainly understand that the moon is square with Sun and the Venus is square with Saturn, and so things might seem slow, they might seem even sort of pointless, but that's just your perception. And if you make a real effort to get going on things, and you just do things one step at a time, even if you're feeling very negative about it all, just keep going, and in the end you will start making an impact. Gemini, the Sun is still making a conjunction to Mercury. This can't be avoided. Sun and Mercury are still very close to one another, and so this Sun conjunct Mercury. Sun conjunct Mercury is something that may be a little short-circuiting, because you might burn yourself out, or you might feel that you're burning yourself out. There's some heavy force out there that is just preventing you from being yourself, and you just can't do it. Something definitely holding you back, and you have to ask, what is it? And even when you try to say something, the words are there, the words are in your mind, but do they come out? If they do come out, do they come out right? And so it's difficult to express yourself today, I think, but you certainly regard it as being important. Heliocentrically, the Earth is conjunct Mercury, so it is a time of communication. It should be a time of communication, but getting those words out is just hard work. Maybe it's because you want to get it right. You have a particular idea about what you want to say, and if you can't say it absolutely correctly, well, that's not good enough. So maybe you shouldn't try. So what do you do about it? And well, I'm a Gemini. Sun is conjunct Mercury. I'll be honest, I'm making this video, I'm not in the mood. We can't be in the mood all the time. This video, by the way, me making this video, is really difficult. It's just completely difficult to get this video out. I'm starting late. I'm having to make lots of lots of stops. I'm making mistakes. I'm just feeling, I'm not feeling myself today. But that's Sun conjunct Mercury. That is something maybe to be expected, and perhaps the key to it all is the fact that there is this first quarter moon, and what that means is that the moon in Scorpio is making a square to Mercury. It's making a square to the Sun. That is the challenge. So the question is, Gemini, how do you get yourself together? And you get yourself together by being properly organized. That's the problem. I think that's the problem. That Geminis, perhaps at the moment, have not taken matters of organizational and perhaps of a bureaucratic and organizational nature. They probably haven't taken them seriously. And they've assumed that things will just sort themselves out. And that just might be a lack of preparation. And so, Gemini, if you do feel that things aren't quite working as they should, it may be maybe your fault to the extent that you haven't properly prepared. You have assumed it will all work out, and perhaps it's not all working out. Or maybe I'm just projecting my own material onto you. But I'm not saying that you should just plow on and just keep going, keep making mistakes. You should think about, what else needs to be done. And I think that, what is needed to be done is that you do need to be, properly organized. And, at the same time, some Geminis may not be feeling too good about financial issues. There is a square between Venus and Saturn at the moment, and Venus has just gone into Cancer. Venus in Cancer, from a Gemini perspective, can be about money, and so when you've got Venus square Saturn, you can be concerned about, have you got enough money? Can you do everything you want to do? There may be unexpected bills, unexpected expenses, and if you're socializing with Venus square Saturn, then friends can be expensive. Friends can have expensive tastes, and additionally, Venus is square Neptune, and so with Venus square Neptune, that's another reason to be careful about money. You might not fully know what's going on, and it all seems chaotic, and then there is a danger, of making mistakes. Now, Gemini, don't feel that I'm persecuting you by being quite negative. For all the 12 signs, I'm probably going to be, in general, more negative than usual. So, don't think that I'm singling you out. Cancer. The moon continues moving through Scorpio. And, as I said yesterday, I think that moon in Scorpio, it's a good place for the moon to be in if you're a Cancer. Not everyone appreciates the moon being in Scorpio, but as far as you're concerned, it's in a water sign. You do understand some of the problems of the moon and being in Scorpio. It can be about emotions getting trapped. You have strong feelings, but can you always express these feelings? You understand that. But I think, Cancer, you also understand that there really are ways of expressing your emotions and being comfortable with your emotions, and it doesn't require anyone else's help. You can just be yourself in your own way. And the moon is additionally making a conjunction to true black moon Lilith, and that might sound heavy. True black moon Lilith is a body that astrologers have been quite concerned about. They seem to find it interesting. And true black moon Lilith can be about sort of the deeper emotions, things that some people don't want to touch. But with this conjunction, it's perhaps giving you a clue about how to make the most of everything that you are. If you're a typical Cancer, you have strong feelings, and the more you can integrate your feelings, the better. I mean, not only are you going to feel more comfortable, but you're also going to be more creative. I mean, creativity, real creativity requires you to really, get to the bottom of things and to get in touch with the darkness that is true Black Moon Lilith. This is not something that necessarily needs to be discussed, but it's something that you are very aware of, and true Black Moon Lilith is perhaps indicating to you the underlying picture. You can see things that other people can't, and you can see the darkness not just of yourself but also of everyone else, and the fact that people do have motivations that are not always very pleasant. And the moon, it makes a square to the sun, and so that means it's a first quarter moon, and this first quarter moon might have a material side to it. It could be about money and an understanding of money, and understanding other people's attitudes to money, and seeing how grasping and greedy and self-interested other people can be. And if you are aware of this, well, that does kind of put you in a strong position. And another aspect we've got, perhaps continuing on a fairly sort of material theme, is a square between Venus and Saturn. And for most people, this Venus-Saturn square is not easy. Venus, the planet of love, square Saturn, it just squelches it. But that's one way of looking at it. Maybe that's a rather sort of unsubtle view. But Venus can just be about the way we feel and our emotional sensitivity, and it's square Saturn, so we don't feel great. But from your perspective, Venus is now in your own sign, and additionally, Saturn is in Aries. It's an angular sign. It's Aries in the Cancer chart is can be connected with ambition, everything that you're trying to achieve. And so with Venus square Saturn, Cancer, you're quite capable of being very tough. You can look at what needs to be done. And so if you're working today, then you can be very focused, and you won't be especially sentimental. Now, Venus in Cancer, in one sense, is a sentimental placement. But when Venus in Cancer is square Saturn, it's not so sentimental. It can be tough and self-interested. And there is a self-interest to Venus in Cancer, and in the same way that there's a self-interest to the sign Cancer in general. And there's nothing wrong with self-interest. Sometimes you do have to look after yourself. And so with Venus square Saturn, you're going to be able to really concentrate on what matters to you. And your emotions are real, but they're not going to let you down. And you can really focus on what you want to achieve. Leo, first quarter moon today. Moon is in Scorpio. The sun is in Leo, and so one way of looking at the first quarter moon is to say that perhaps you need to ground yourself just a bit, because the sun has went into Leo just over a week ago. We had a new moon in Leo, and hopefully that was very fortunate for you. I mean, it encouraged you to move forward. It encouraged you to see all the possibilities that were available, and hopefully you're taking advantage of them. But you can't just go forward forever, and at some stage you need to make sure that you are properly anchored. And anchoring would be a very good way of looking at this first quarter moon. before you go any further, make sure that everything is sorted out, that everything is in order. And it might not be entirely what you want to do, but you've got to think about the rest of a lunar cycle. So if you're thinking about some of your ambitions, some of the things you would like to do, then maybe with this first quarter moon, you do have to take a step back and to make sure that you're in the right place, that everything is safe and secure, and that you feel comfortable. And once you've done that, you can then go on, and you can move forward. And and also be prepared to listen. Listening does matter. At the moment the Sun is conjunct Mercury. Now there are several ways of looking at Sun conjunct Mercury. Now you could say that Sun conjunct Mercury, Mercury is colouring the Sun, so Sun conjunct Mercury just allows you to maybe talk your head off. There's a lot you want to say. You've got strong opinions, and so once you start talking, where does it stop? So that is a way of looking at Sun conjunct Mercury. Another way of looking at Sun conjunct Mercury is to say, well, Mercury represents ideas, differences of opinion, perhaps even different people with different views. And so Sun conjunct Mercury, well, the Sun might just say, well, I'm not interested. I've got this all sorted out. I don't need to hear your opinions. Or you might be so sure that you've got it right that you don't want to check. Just do a bit of research, read something, read a different opinion. It can make all the difference. But at the moment with that Sun conjunct Mercury, there's just some danger that Leos just do things in their own way. They're very single-minded. It's great to be single-minded, but sometimes single-mindedness can be a problem. And so you could say that the Sun conjunct Mercury and also the first quarter moon, the moon square Sun, Mercury conjunct Sun, are two things. Both Mercury and the moon are challenging the Sun, and they're saying, hold on, just stop what you're doing. Make sure you listen. Make sure that you anchor yourself. Just don't keep going. Try to adopt a different view. Now the Sun might say, well, or Leo might say, well, I don't need to do that. I'm fine. I'm good. But you might say that, but I would not recommend that. So Leo, just do consider alternative viewpoints, and don't allow yourself to think that other people are just a pain in the neck, that they're just there to restrict you, and they're not. Other people, including your family, are there not just to ground you, but they're also there potentially to sort of point you in the right direction. Virgo. The Sun is still pretty close to Mercury. Mercury is, of course, still retrograde, so I do have to say that Mercury continues to be under pressure. I don't think it's as bad as it was yesterday, but Virgo, just consider the possibility that you haven't got all the answers, that some things are complicated, and if you want to get to grips with them, it will take time. And additionally, you have to think about all the things that you might be weighing in on you and distorting your judgment. And distortions can take place. Well, they can take place from other people, perhaps other people misleading you. That's certainly possible, but it just could be about you just misreading the signals. So Virgo, however sure you are about something, just consider the possibility that you haven't got it all sorted out. And do remember that Mercury is retrograde, and it stays retrograde, when does it go direct? I think Mercury goes direct on around the 11th. So for the next 10 days, perhaps more, just don't feel obliged to make a decision. You might like to make a decision, you might like to make commitments, but there are still things that need to be done, and you perhaps have to sort of work through some of your concerns. I mean, it's okay to have concerns, but you just don't want them to get out of hand and and become unreasonable. And so we also have a first quarter moon, and so the moon is making a square to making a square to the sun, and it's also making a square to Mercury. And the challenge perhaps with this first quarter moon is to talk about some of the things that are bothering you, that you're keeping to yourself, and you don't really want to do it. I don't know why. You may feel you're compromising yourself, or you just may want to keep things secret just for the sake of it. But having the right conversation with the right person can be something very useful. The moon is making a trine to Jupiter, so the moon at sort of 11 degrees Scorpio, at least it's noon New York time, is making a trine to Jupiter at 11 degrees Cancer. And so that moon Jupiter trine strikes me as being a bit of a saving grace. And so the right people are out there, they're there to listen, and they can give you some really good feedback, if you give them a chance. Libra. Venus is making a square to Saturn, and it's also making a square to Neptune, and this is likely to have an effect on you. Venus is, after all, your ruler. It's in a very sort of high-profile position, in Cancer, right at the top of your chart. And so, with Venus square Saturn and Venus square Neptune, something might trip you up, or it might block you, and you have to be aware of this, and you also have to get some perspective. So Venus square Saturn might appear to be something holding you up in a very serious way, and you can't get over it easily. But that's just the appearance, and you shouldn't forget that Venus square Saturn, it's not an aspect that lasts so very long. Venus is moving quite quickly at the moment, and so with Venus square Saturn, there just may be moments which you were already feeling sort of yesterday, Thursday, when you just couldn't get something done, and you may also have had quite a negative view of other people. It seemed that certain people were holding you up and preventing you from, doing everything that you really wanted to do. So what do you do? Well, it's important to take people seriously, and to recognize that some people do have the power to prevent you from achieving whatever it is that you want to achieve. So you can recognize that. Then you can ask yourself, well, what's it about? Sometimes other people have a constructive role. Sometimes it's a good idea to be stopped or to be given constructive criticism. But on the other hand, not everyone is helpful. We assume that everyone wants us to succeed. It's just a natural assumption, isn't it? But jealousy is all around us, and people act in the strangest of ways, and they also put their own interests first, even if we know them very well. And so you have to realize this when you start considering, for example, the advice you're getting. if you're given advice over the course of a day, why are you being given this advice? Who benefits from this advice? How does the other person benefit? What might their agenda be? So it's okay, Libra, to be suspicious, but you don't want to be paranoid. And additionally, Libra, you like to make people happy. You don't like to rock the boat. I mean, 75% of Librans are like that. The other 25% are in a very sort of different category, and they enjoy causing chaos. But 75% of Librans do like harmony, and so you might want to make people happy and do what people say, but you have got to think about yourself. And especially now, this is a time when Librans need to be thinking about making good progress, and the wrong person could cause a lot of trouble, and also could be quite misleading, because Venus is not just making a square to Saturn, it's also making a square to Neptune, and Neptune can be quite an undermining influence, and the things you hear, the things you say could confuse you. You thought you'd made up your mind, and then you're told something else, and you might feel that you have to go back to a drawing board. But maybe, Libra, you should trust yourself to get it right, and that might be the right approach. But also with this Venus square Saturn and Neptune, don't make anyone more significant than they actually are. No one is that significant. You need to just take everyone, not with a pinch of salt, but just don't exaggerate anyone's importance, and ask yourself, what matters for you, and then it should be okay. I mean, I'm not saying that today is going to be great, and on a positive note, maybe it's a good idea to just pause just for a moment, just to take stock of things, and then over the next couple of days, Venus will move away from the square to Saturn, and move away from the square to Neptune, and it will start making a conjunction to Jupiter, and things will really start happening for you. I mean, I'm really optimistic about this Venus conjunct Jupiter. I think that you should already be starting to plan for it. What are you planning to do when that Venus-Jupiter conjunction becomes exact? Okay, so maybe it's just not appropriate. Maybe you're not going to get a chance, but you should give it your best shot. And so really try to work out on how you can maximize your good fortune over the next week or two. Scorpio. There is a square between Venus and Saturn today, and this square between Venus and Saturn might have an influence on you, or it might have an influence on some of the people around you, because Venus is ruler of Taurus, and of course Taurus is your opposite sign, and so with Venus square Saturn, you might find that certain people are under the weather. They're not their usual selves, and at the same time, they might be rather confused, and they might not be sure what they want. And if you spend a lot of time with people, and particularly if you do things in such a way that you're treating people at face value, you take what they say at face value, you take their concerns at face value, you support other people's worries, then you could be making matters worse. Yeah, supporting other people's worries, I do mean that. It's just easy when someone has got a tale of woe and they're telling you how bad things are, you just accept it at face value. But yeah, maybe they are exaggerating, and maybe things aren't quite so bad. And Scorpio, if you can be bothered, you probably have the ability to make people feel sort of happier, and sort of more optimistic, you can do it. I mean, don't forget the moon is in your sign, and the moon is in Scorpio. It's kind of making a trine to Venus. It's also making a trine to Jupiter, and so with those two aspects, you can be quite a healing person. You can make people feel better about themselves, and you can encourage other people to look beyond their immediate problems, because some people can just get really stuck, and what people need sometimes is to just get a sense of perspective, to just see the broader picture. And right now that's very much something that Scorpios can do. You can really you can take a material problem, something that seems really bad, and you can contrast it with something else, something more important, and really perhaps make people realize that some things are just not worth bothering with. Now, you don't have to spend all your time worrying about other people. You've got to think about yourself. And at the moment, with Moon trine Jupiter, that's a fortunate aspect. That's fortunate for you, and it doesn't matter that the moon is in Scorpio. In fact, it's great that the moon is in Scorpio, because the moon is in your sign, and with the moon making trines to Venus and Jupiter, you're probably luckier than average. And part of the key to your luck is letting go, not allowing things to be a big distraction for you. Yeah, Mars, your ruler, is still conjunct the South Node in Virgo, but that conjunction is quite far out now. There's an orb of about 7 degrees, so you're now able to see the broader picture, and that's going to make you feel good. Yeah, I think it's going to make other people feel good as well. So you can be a force for good at the moment, and at the same time, it's not just about other people. You can do things your way, and in fact, probably if you do things your way and you do the things you want to do, then in the process, there's a good chance that everyone else will benefit. Sagittarius, you don't necessarily have to be here, there, and everywhere. The moon is still in Scorpio, and sort of yesterday the moon sort of edged into Scorpio, and now it's very much in Scorpio. It's making a trine to Jupiter, and that trine to Jupiter, I would have said, is pretty fortunate. It makes you feel good about yourself, but there's nothing you have to do. In fact, if you're feeling good about yourself, you don't necessarily want to share that feeling, because if you discuss your optimism, you tell people that you're optimistic, you tell them that everything's looking good, you just might get negativity in return. And don't forget that Venus is making a square to Saturn. Venus is making a square to Neptune. Venus square Saturn does indicate that some people out there are miserable. They have a rather negative view of the world. And do you want them to share it with you? Probably not. And so, Sagittarius, it might be best that you just you keep your own company, and you don't feel that you have to do something. I think you might, though. I mean, some Sagittarians, if they do get involved with the world and its problems, then they might get frustrated, and they might feel that they have to try and do something. But if you were to try and do something dramatic today, then I don't think it would work out. It's not a day for taking big initiatives, especially if other people are involved, because it just wouldn't work, I don't think, and you might end up feeling frustrated. So Sagittarius, you concentrate on what matters to you, and if you've got any sort of private projects, it would be a good time to embark on them. And don't forget the power of your own feelings. Your emotions are are stronger than usual, but I mean that in a way that is fortunate, because you can use the power of your feelings to to really get involved with something that is really important to you. Not important to anyone else, maybe, but it matters to you. And so, if you do things your way, then over the course of the day, you can feel sort of a great sense of fulfillment, that you're actually moving in the right direction, and you can feel very connected. Now, as far as relationships are concerned, people always want to know about relationships. Maybe not always, but as far as relationships are concerned, I wouldn't worry about it too much. I mean, the Sun is making a conjunction to Mercury, and that Sun conjunct Mercury may indicate that the people close to you are not necessarily on great form, or if they're not on, if they are on good form, if they think they're on good form, then they might still be getting something wrong. They might be quite impulsive, and so other people, even if you really care about them, could today just be more trouble than they're worth. And if they're not confused, they might then be opinionated, which is just kind of worse than being confused. Well, they can be opinionated and confused, which is just terrible, isn't it? So probably not a good idea to put too much emphasis on relationships, especially if you're dealing with people who in the past have been arrogant, or the kind of people that think they're right all the time. Those kind of people, at least for today, should probably be avoided. Capricorn. There is a square aspect between Venus and Saturn today, and it's not great, Venus square Saturn. And you have to think about why it might not be great. Now, one way of looking at Venus square Saturn is to say, well, it's poor Venus. Poor Venus has to deal with a square to Saturn. Saturn can be seen as a planet of restriction and inhibition and authority, telling Venus what to do, and Venus doesn't have a chance, and Venus has to be meek and can't express itself. So that's one way of looking at it. But you're a Capricorn. Saturn is your ruler. So the tough side of that aspect, the Saturn side of it, is you. And so Saturn is potentially having an influence on other people. And Venus, don't forget, has just moved into Cancer. And Venus has moved into Cancer. Cancer is your opposite sign. So that does indicate that right now is a time when relationships are becoming important, or at least becoming more important. And Venus does stay in Cancer for most of August, and so over the next few weeks, relationships will develop. They will require your attention. But right now, with Venus square Saturn, you have the capacity for being difficult. You can maybe undermine people. You can make people feel self-conscious. You can make them feel nervous, and you might be the person who makes things not happen. Venus in Cancer might want things, might have ideas and plans, and you could be the person that says no. And you may have good reason to. I mean, there's nothing wrong with that. But it all depends, doesn't it? And so you have to make a special effort today to respect people. Even if they're in a weaker position from you, even if you don't have a high opinion of them, even if you feel they're in the process of messing things up, you've still got to have some respect for them, and you've got to try to understand their perspective. because if you don't understand their perspective, if you give no indication that you understand their perspective, then they might just ignore you. And also, Capricorn, do consider your own motives in any relationship you're in. Ask yourself, what's it all about? What are you trying to protect? And are you genuinely acting in another person's interests, or are you perhaps looking at things from your own selfish viewpoint? There's nothing wrong with that, by the way. We all need to think about ourselves, but try to be objective if you possibly can, because I think it does matter. And another reason to try to be objective is you don't want to be confused. As a Capricorn, you're supposed to be quite a sort of organized, disciplined, together, earthy kind of person, but today you can be blinded, and what other people say and what other people do might confuse you. And so other people are actually quite difficult to read right now. And so, it's important, Capricorn, that you don't rush to judgment, one way or the other. I mean, it can work both ways. You can, in certain cases, be fooled by another person. It is possible, if that other person is clever and is manipulative and, can pull the right emotional strings or the wrong emotional strings. So you can be fooled, but at the same time, you can be overly harsh, and so it's going to be difficult to evaluate people. Maybe it's going to be difficult to evaluate not just people but anything, because you come over as being someone who tries to keep your emotions in check, but perhaps the harder you try to keep your emotions in check, the more those emotions slip up, and you might come to a judgment that is ultimately shows itself to be incorrect. So a lot of objectivity is important today, and additionally, treat people with respect, but don't necessarily believe everything they say. Aquarius, there's no reason why it can't be quite a profitable and constructive day. There's a lot you want to do, I think, and you have the chance to make good progress. It may not be spectacular progress, but it can be quite a successful end to the week, if Friday is indeed the end to your week. So you can sort of wrap things up, and if anything is not properly organized, or might still be in a state of chaos, you can deal with the matter very quickly. And so that's something you should be thinking about. It might not be exciting, but it's not all about excitement. I don't think that today need be exciting. And additionally, it looks as if you're going to be fairly disciplined. I mean, the big aspect today is Venus square Saturn, and so of course Saturn is your ruler, and so with Venus square Saturn, you can be quite controlling. You can make sure that everything is is shipshape and in order, and there is a downside to that. Some people might find you being sort of rather difficult. I mean, I think you're going to have particular views about the way things should be done. So if you are with other people and you're involved, for example, in some collective joint task, you will have very particular ideas, and you don't want to be too inflexible. I mean, you've got to consider alternative views, but your sense of discipline is going to be stronger than usual, and not everyone might appreciate it, but I think they will respect it. So perhaps that's what you should be thinking about today. Just making sure that basically, everything is just in order. There is first quarter moon today. The moon is square the sun, and if we're talking about the first quarter moon, we should probably go back to think about the new moons, the previous new moon. So there was a new moon just over a week ago at around 2 degrees Leo. I thought it was quite a powerful new moon from an Aquarian perspective. In your opposite sign, that new moon was a sort of opposition Pluto, and so that might have been about certain people making their presence felt, or you being aware of other people's influence, and perhaps being of a view that you maybe needed other people's help, or that, like it or not, you had to take into account other people's requirements. But now you've got first quarter moon, you've got moon in Scorpio square the sun in Leo, and the challenge perhaps here is to think about what you want, what's important to you, and how that relates to what other people are demanding. Sometimes you have to accept that other people have demands, but at the same time you've got to pursue your own interests, and that's perhaps what the moon in Scorpio is all about. And in the process, being able to tune into your own power. Today, this moon in Scorpio is making a conjunction to true black moon Lilith, and that could be about you having to be selfish, to put your own interest first, and in the process taking a risk. And the risk might be of offending someone. They assume you're going to do something. They assume you're going to do things their way, and you decide to do something else. And you did this. You're doing it with your eyes open. You know that if you do things your way, you are taking a risk, and that relationships may be put under pressure. But Aquarius, you have to think about yourself, not exclusively, but your own interests do matter. And today really is, I think, a day for putting your own interests first. Pisces. Moon is making a very nice trine to Jupiter today. So Moon in Scorpio making a trine to Jupiter in Cancer, and this trine is inevitably going to have an effect on Pisceans. It's going to make Pisceans feel more positive than usual. You perhaps can see what can happen if you give yourself the chance. I mean, that's the important point. You've got to give yourself the chance, and you've got to forget about other things going on. For example, today there's a square between Venus and Saturn, which I've been going on and on about. But do you need to be impacted by this Venus-Saturn square? I don't think you do. Venus square Saturn might be about certain other people feeling under the weather, and not everyone can express themselves. But as far as you're concerned, it shouldn't really matter, and you shouldn't worry too much about what other people are thinking and doing and worrying about. And Pisces, if you just go with it and do something you enjoy, without overthinking it. Some Pisceans, you could overthink it. You might have something that you really want to do, and you're ready to do it, and then you think about all the reasons you can't do it. Maybe you're like on the verge of doing something, you're ready to go, you're ready to sign on the dotted line, and suddenly you realize something. It hadn't occurred to you before. And it appears to be the deal breaker, the thing that spoils everything. But you shouldn't have that kind of, that sort of state of mind. If something is right for you, then there cannot be a deal breaker, because it's you, it's your destiny. And so just, flow with it and find a way around it. The deal breaker might, on its own, in isolation, appear to be really serious. And you might jump to conclusions about the deal breaker, but when you actually do some research and you think about it, there's always a way around it. There has to be a way around it. If you're dealing with something that is a fundamental part of who you are. And additionally, today we've got a conjunction between the moon and true black moon Lilith. So we've got moon, trine Jupiter, conjunct true black moon Lilith, and there is a certain spirituality to that. A real spirituality there, and you are able to sort of go beyond the material, not to see the material plane as just holding you back. It can't hold you back, not really. And you may sort of get in touch with, I don't know what one calls it, some sort of higher spirit. I'm not suggesting that you're going to be in touch with sort of weird and scary beings, nothing like that. But it's more your higher spirit. It's a side of yourself that is immortal, and it's something that if you look at it from a distance, it kind of seems quite sort of dark and scary, like sort of true black moon Lilith. But true black moon Lilith is something that needs to be integrated, or rather, it can be integrated, and that's very much something you can do. And once you start to integrate it, everything's going to feel real, and you can just feel yourself to be at the center of things, and you can start enjoying yourself at a very high level. And it's just very important that you don't allow other people to distract you. Not everyone is enjoying themselves. Some people, if they're not enjoying themselves, might think it's important that you don't enjoy yourself either, but that's not what it's about. It's about Pisces. You have a chance to today to feel real satisfaction. And those are my forecasts for the 12 signs. And it's now time to look at the I Ching. So I asked the question, what is Friday going to be like for those watching the I Ching section of this video? And the first hexagram I got was hexagram number 33, retreat. So this is not a day for moving forward. It's a day for consolidation. And perhaps if you've taken something too far, you should consider going back, because it's retreat. And it's not retreat out of cowardice, just giving up on something. Sometimes one does go as far as one can, and one reaches a certain point and one thinks, well, that's it, you've done your best. If you want a sort of military analogy, it might be a sort of reconnaissance mission. You've found out what you can, but before it's too late, before you get yourself into trouble, you retreat, and it's absolutely reasonable. Now this hexagram retreat is described in a very different way by Greg Winkup in his translation of I Ching. He doesn't call it retreat. He calls it the piglet. Now that seems really bizarre, to call this hexagram the piglet. And his logic goes like this. He says that the piglet represents a small animal. It starts off as a small animal that needs to develop. that needs to be fattened up. I mean, not necessarily for the slaughter, but just needs to get stronger. And where is the best place for a small, vulnerable animal to get stronger? Well, in an enclosure. You don't want to go out into the open while you're not strong enough. And so retreat can be seen as something instead as really quite favourable, because we're building up one's strength. And so that might be something that you might want to think about. And so, we do have, a number of moving lines. And so we find that the third line moves. And, the third line is indicating that we do have to be careful about restricting ourselves. Retreat is all well and good, but if we're being too tough on oneself, there might be a problem. And sort of Wynkoop talks about the piglet as being tied up, and that's not a good position for the piglet to be in, because why is it being tied up? Well, it might be tied up getting ready for the slaughter. And so to begin with, you want to be able to maintain your freedom of action all the way through. You've got to be free. You've got to be free to retreat. Sometimes we don't retreat because of other people. Other people are suggesting, well, you keep going, you stay where you are, but there's a restriction there. Maybe there's some moral obligation to continue with what we're doing, or at least a perceived moral obligation to continue with what we're doing. Or maybe we don't want to lose face, or we're just being encouraged to keep moving. And so we don't want to be restricted, because restriction can be dangerous. And so when we're thinking about what to do, it's so important that we are free, that we're not tied up, we're not trussed up like the piglet, and the piglet needs to be free, because if a piglet is trussed up, bad things can happen. And then we've got the fifth and the sixth line moves, and they're fortunate lines in this context. And so it does indicate that whatever our decisions, we're doing the right thing, and there's no disgrace in what we're doing. We almost feel quite good about backing off. It's the right thing to do, and we start to find that we have more and more freedom. So that's a key thing. We always maintain our freedom. And to begin with, when I talked about being restricted, that's just a temporary state. Once we break free of those bounds, we find that we can be very flexible. And that is sort of the key to success when you think about retreat. Going back to sort of a military. I mean, you think about what I think Chairman Mao, didn't he say, enemy advances, we retreat, and all of this kind of stuff, and you go with the flow, and that's how you win the war. And retreats don't have to be permanent. You can always flow back in when the situation changes. Now, the second hexagram, what retreat moves to, is potentially a problem. And the hexagram it moves to is hexagram number 16, which is contentment. And with this hexagram, there's a lot of complacency here, and this might indicate that we don't retreat, we don't take preventative measures. We see a problem, but we just say, well, do we need to bother? We're happy where we are, it's fine. We can see that sooner or later things will get bad, but things are okay now. We're always told, aren't we, to live in the present, that the secret to happiness is to live in the present. I get that. You see the Buddhist perspective, every breath is your last, and so on. Though living in the present can be quite dangerous. You can be enjoying the present, and why worry about the future? And the future will arrive. And with contentment, the implication here is that what's about to arrive may not be fortunate, and we should have retreated while the going was good, and we have a half-hearted retreat in the end. You know, everything was ready. We were ready to pack up. We were ready to protect ourselves. We were ready to quit the scene, but we didn't, because it was just easier to stay where we were, to just continue to be in a position where, in reality, there's a real risk, and it happens, and the future arrives, and it's not good. But it's up to you. It needn't happen. If you make a timely retreat, then things are going to be okay, and just do avoid complacency. And so let me now turn back to the astrology, and one aspect, well, the main aspect we have today is Venus square Saturn. But Venus square Saturn is taking place at the same time as Sun square Moon, and so here's Venus square Saturn. It takes place today, August the 1st, 2:34 p.m. London time, and so there is Venus and there is Saturn, and it's taking place at the time of the first quarter moon. And Venus is not just square Saturn, it's square Neptune. And you might take the view that Saturn and Neptune, we've got the Saturn-Neptune conjunction. And so what Venus is doing is it is bringing into focus the Saturn-Neptune conjunction. Venus, forget the fact that it's Venus, the planet of love. Forget that. It's just an inner planet, and it's aspecting Saturn and Neptune. And so because of that, there might be a great Saturn-Neptune feel today, to Friday, the first day of the month. And so look at what happens. These may be indicators of what the Saturn-Neptune conjunction is all about. And we're already starting to feel it. It's a new month. I'm not very optimistic about August, by the way. I'll probably go into sort of details about that later. August can be a difficult month, and I think this month could be especially difficult. And it doesn't help, but it kicks off with a Venus square Saturn. I mean, you could say that the beginning of the month tells us something about the overall pattern of the month. And of course, August starts with Venus square Saturn. It starts with the moon in Scorpio. It's not great. And so Saturn, Neptune, it can be about fear. It can be a day that is fearful, and it may be about things dissolving, things breaking down. For example, we had the earthquake in sort of Kamchatka, off the coast of Russia, and I was kindly reminded of this by commenter Fri Aug 5698, who wrote as follows. She wrote, "This is a perfect manifestation of Saturn-Neptune conjunction, the ring of fire Leo Aries. This quake occurred in the Kuril-Kamchatka Trench, where the Pacific Plate dives beneath the Okhotsk Plate. It's part of the Pacific Ring of Fire, Earth's most seismically active zone. Because the earthquake was shallow and along a subduction zone, it violently displaced the seafloor, pushing a massive wall of water outward in all directions." So you could say this is very much a Saturn-Neptune event. So Neptune is the sea, and sort of Saturn is everything being held together, that plate, and it all gets undermined. And so that was a Saturn-Neptune event. And then you have Venus coming along. Now Venus wasn't quite making that square. So if we look at the chart of that of the earthquake, Venus was at 28 Gemini. So yes, Venus was applying to the square of the Saturn-Neptune conjunction. Was it quite there? Maybe not entirely. But with Venus making squares to square to Saturn Neptune today, it just might bring out Saturn Neptune, in all the many ways it can manifest. I mean, by the way, as far as the earthquake is concerned, I think I got the time and the place right. It sort of fits. We've got Saturn Neptune fairly close to the descendant, so Saturn and Neptune are angular. Jupiter's on the midheaven and the moon was ascendant. It was on the ascendant. So maybe the earthquake has something to do with, certainly I think it probably does have something to do with the Saturn-Neptune conjunction. Perhaps Venus was involved, but Venus was not exactly there. Now, another thing that's happened recently is the price of copper. I don't know if you've been watching this, but I think yesterday it fell something like 20%. And I was trying to work out, when this happened, and I was looking at a graph, and it seemed to be sort of. Well, when I say yesterday, this would have been the 30th, so that would be. Let's get this right. So that would have been Wednesday. Wednesday, the price of copper fell 20%. I mean, a 20% fall in the price of copper is quite large for commodities, and I don't know whether any of that's come back. I don't really follow the commodities markets too closely, but I think that Trump had said that there was going to be tariffs on finished copper goods, but not on just raw copper, and that sort of completely messed up the copper market. And so this is the moment it happened. So remember, Venus is the traditional ruler of copper. The word copper is cognate with Cyprus. So Cyprus is where Venus appeared. Cyprus is the Isle of Venus. It's copper. It's all connected with each other. So Venus wasn't quite in Cancer. It was making it was making a square to Saturn and Neptune, but it wasn't quite there. But Venus was on the Aries point, very close to the solstice point. So it was within half a degree of a solstice point. So you could say that Venus was quite prominent, at that time. And so maybe it's just a coincidence, but there did seem to be some link between Venus approaching the square of Saturn, approaching the solstice point, and this really massive fall in the copper price. And so that I should have thought about that, because Venus and copper, if you're into astrology and commodities, Venus relates to copper, but it's a treacherous business trying to relate astrology to stock market and commodity movements. People have lost a lot of money that way, and so that is a way of looking at Venus square Saturn. But in general, while we have Venus square Saturn, it's not a bundle of laughs, is it? And it's also Venus square Neptune. So it just could be a time where some of us feel under the weather emotionally. Venus is, of course, a universal significator of women. Women in the news. Ursula von der Leyen, she did her trade deal. Of course, a trade deal has to be confirmed. But as Venus was approaching a square to Saturn, you could say Venus that represents a woman doing a bad deal. But Venus wasn't quite there yet. I mean, Venus was a few degrees away from the Saturn-Neptune square. And today, we also have it's also a first quarter moon. So here is the first quarter moon, and so the fact that Venus square Saturn is happening at the same time as the first quarter moon. So first quarter moon is at 9 degrees Scorpio. So at that precise moment of the first quarter moon, Venus was very close, was within actually only 2 arc minutes of it. So that indicates that Venus square Saturn is not just something passing. It may be just baked into the lunar cycle, certainly the next week. And we shouldn't forget that Venus is a universal significator of money, and Venus square Saturn, people could lose money. I mean, I was looking at the markets this morning. Well, the overall stock market didn't. So when I looked this morning, by the way, when I say this morning, I'm looking at it. I'm making this video on Thursday. But, I mean, the overall stock market sort of looked okay. It looked as if it was up a bit. But this is just August hasn't even begun yet, and we're not on that first quarter moon. Well, when I was looking at the markets on Thursday morning when I'm making this video, the last day of July, the markets were, they seemed okay. Well, except the copper market. The copper is, all over the place, and so first quarter moon happening at the same time as Venus square Saturn, same time as Venus square Neptune. I don't think it's just a difficult August the 1st. I think it might indicate that it could be a difficult month ahead. I mean, one way of looking at the month ahead, you could take the chart for the beginning of the month set for New York. So this is August the 1st, midnight New York, and Venus is square Saturn, and we've got the run up to a first quarter moon. So with Venus square Saturn and the moon in Scorpio. The moon was in Scorpio actually at midnight on the year 2000. And thinking about the stock market, the dot-com bubble continued for a few months after January the 1st, 2000. But then of course, we had the dot-com bust, which happened, I think, sort of in March 2000. So we should perhaps be nervous of the markets here. And bearing in mind that we're about to get a full moon. We're about to that full moon happens within a couple of days of Mercury going stationary direct. That's in just over a week, and also we've got a Mars-Saturn opposition. So things are starting to just look a bit dangerous. But I must make it clear, this channel is for entertainment purposes only. I'm not making any predictions about the market. And I finally want to look at an electional chart, or potentially an electional chart. And today, August the 1st, is the 81st anniversary of the Warsaw Uprising. So the Warsaw Uprising was an uprising by the Polish Home Army against the German occupation of Warsaw, and it went on for some time. The Russians were right outside Warsaw, but they didn't intervene. You can understand why they didn't intervene. I mean, the Russians were already thinking about Poland post-war, and so why should they facilitate and give credibility to what they would have perceived as a Western-backed and potentially anti-communist group? So it's kind of not surprising the Russians did nothing. I did read some time ago Norman Davis's book on the it's a long book. I managed to read it cover to cover, Rising 44, but that was a long time ago. So they chose, I think there was this thing called W hour on August the 1st, 1944, which was 5 o'clock in the afternoon for the Warsaw Uprising. So the question is was this a good chart for the uprising? The uprising, if you've been to Warsaw, it's a really big event in Polish history, and you go there. It's in Warsaw. I've been on Warsaw on August the 1st. It's a really, really solemn day, and you can see memorials and candles regarding the war just all over Warsaw. So it is a big event if you're Polish. And so so the question is, was it a good thing to do? Now, there was a view that the rising should have taken place in the morning. The Germans had been warned, so they were kind of ready for it, and they decided to have their rising just after the moon went into Capricorn. So the moon was at 0 degrees 10 minutes Capricorn, and it was making the opposition to to Saturn. You know, by the way, the Warsaw Uprising is not to be confused with the Warsaw Ghetto Uprising. That was in 1943. That was a year earlier. So the moon was applying to a trine of Mercury, and it was applying to a trine of Jupiter. So you might say that that's not so bad. So from an electional point of view, you might have focused on that trine to Jupiter, trine to Mercury, and particularly Mercury's in Virgo, which is in its own sign. But Jupiter is fallen in Virgo, so maybe that's not working quite so well. But you know, you're trying to make the connection between these Virgo planets, Jupiter in Virgo, Mercury in Virgo, and Mars in Virgo, and it does seem that sort of Saturn sort of stops the thing in its tracks. You've got Saturn in the Placidus 7th house, Moon opposition Saturn, so in the end it didn't work out, and perhaps you can use a symbolic measure. I forget when the Warsaw Uprising came to an end, but if you sort of take 1 degree for 1 week, so you might say that, you know, after 5 weeks, perhaps the thing had pretty much run its course. I can't remember how long it lasted for. I think it was 6 weeks, but, you know, correct me if I'm correct. I don't know when it was they actually stopped fighting. So you might say that Moon trine Jupiter, Moon trine Mercury might have represented initial success, but in the end, that Moon opposition Saturn sort of ground the thing to a halt. So that is, you know, a way of looking at it. And, you know, interestingly, there was another uprising at the end of August, an uprising that just gets so much less attention. And that was the Slovak national uprising, and that was August the 29th, 1944. And likewise, the moon was in Capricorn, making an opposition to Saturn. I mean, and Mars was conjunct Neptune, and, you know, likewise the Slovak national uprising, which was more widely supported by the Allies. I mean, the Soviets were supporting it. The British and the Americans were supporting it, so it had sort of quite wide support, but you know, it was difficult to supply it, and the Russians couldn't. They needed to make a breakthrough to support it, and it just, what was it, in northern Slovakia they couldn't do it, so the uprising fizzled out, and so. But it's just interesting that, you know, Moon was again opposition Saturn. So if you're planning on having an uprising, for whatever reason, you probably should avoid Moon-Saturn oppositions. So anyway, that's all I've got to say for today. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did enjoy this video, I'd be very grateful if you were to like it. If you're not subscribed, I'd be super grateful if you were to subscribe. If you want to buy me a coffee, there's a link in the description, and I will talk to you again tomorrow.